Welcome. My name is Gloria Maria Ortiz. I'm a research specialist at the New York State Education Department Regional Bilingual Research Network at NYU. Welcome to our webinar. Today we will be talking about ELLs screening, identification, and placement process during remote learning. This webinar will provide information regarding the regulatory changes to CR Part 154 about the screening, identification, and placement process of English language learners. The information is based on the New York State Education Department memo dated July 15, 2020 for schools on remote learning, and the New York State Education Department in New York City reopening guidelines for schools opening with person-to-person and hybrid education during this school year. This webinar will also address the required additional academic and social-emotional supports to be put in place to address the loss of English language acquisition during COVID-19 school closures. It will address how the use of the interview process can be enhanced with questions to get to help the trained pedagogue to get to know the student better, as well as offer suggestions on how to assess information about the student's academic oral English and basic reading, writing, and math skills. It will also provide the school with ideas on how it can increase opportunities to establish good communication with new parents, as well as ideas to increase the parents' capacity to support their child while learning at home. Due to COVID-19 school closings, the New York State Education Department has adopted a temporary regulatory change to provide flexibility on the timeline requirement for the ELLs screening, identification, and placement process. The New York State Education Department has also provided flexibility in the timeline for notification to parents of student placement. I will provide some guidance as to what these processes look like and what can be helpful to the schools at this time. The first procedure to follow in this process is the completion of page 2 of the Home Language Identification Survey, or HLQ. The Home Language Questionnaire may be presented and submitted to the parent in digital form. The informal interview to complete the survey should be done by a qualified pedagogue. The informal interview should be in English and in the student and parents' preferred language. If there's no one available who speaks the home language of the parent in school, contact the translation and interpretation unit to obtain a trained translator. All documents used during the process are to be collected and stored by the pedagogue, as well as any notes the pedagogue took during the interview. The parent should be notified that a formal interview will be conducted when schools reopen. A copy of the survey will be mailed home, but the parent does not have to sign it. The New York State Education Department will extend a regulatory change to CR Part 154 regarding the timeline for identification and placement of English language learners as follows. Qualifying schools that following district safety protocols will reopen with person-to-person or hybrid schooling must adhere to the following timeline for enrollment. The timeline for schools to complete the screening, identification, and placement process will increase from 10 days to 30 days for students that fit the following criteria. Students enrolled or were in the process of completing the formal identification process during COVID-19 school closures. Students enrolled during summer 2020. Students enrolled during the first 20 days of schools reopening. However, this timeline flexibility is only for those students in the categories I just described. The timeline for screening and identification of 10 days, as mandated by CR Part 154, resumes for potential ELLs enrolling thereafter. The parent and the student also participate in an interview. You must, as parents, what is their preferred language, and what mode of communication they would prefer. This interview is now more important than ever, given that the New York State Education Department has postponed the administration of an initial assessment or the NYSED. Therefore, we must maximize the potential of this interview tool to obtain as much information as we can to get to know the student, know what they bring, and what they need. You can ask the student to describe their formal school. Ask questions like what was school like in their home country? What was the language of instruction in the school? How many years they attend the school? Were the students in his classroom around the same age? Also ask them about their present situation. Is there space in the home for the student to do schoolwork? Do they have a computer? Have they ever used a computer? Is there anyone who speaks English and can help them with schoolwork? Just as important is that you ask about their needs. How does the student feel? Is anyone at home? Is everyone at home in good health? Do they need help with food or housing? Is there anyone in the home that they can communicate with in English in case of an emergency? During the interview, you may suspect that the student has had inconsistent interrupted education. You should then administer the SIFE oral interview questionnaire if the identification process identified the student as an ELL. Based on the responses to the questionnaire, the school has up to a year and 4 months to identify an ELL as a SIFE student as long as it's within the year of admission. The days that schools were closed are not to be counted towards this timeline. You should also administer the multiple language screener to assess the entry level of reading, writing, and math in the home language of the student. You can find this assessment in the New York State Education Department website. Pay close attention to what skill the student brings in their home language. Please note that we have included a link to the New York State Education Department website that provides a list of resources for these students. There you will find strategies and activities from the SIFE Bridges curriculum and other resources. If you're interested in additional information about Bridges, please contact your Auburn. There are other ELLs re-entering the New York State school system, and for them the process is different. A returning ELL that has attended a school outside New York State, attended a non-public school both in and outside New York State, or has returned from an extended medical leave within 2 consecutive academic years will continue to be designated as an English language learner and will receive services according to their English language proficiency level. A returning English language learner that has attended a school outside New York State, attended a non-public school both in and outside New York State, or has returned from an extended medical leave after 2 consecutive academic years will follow the steps outlined in the initial identification process for English language learners. If an English language learner who scored as proficient in the NYSED lab leaves and returns after 2 consecutive academic years, they will follow the steps outlined in the initial identification process for English language learners. If a new student comes to enroll with an IEP, the school must allow the language proficiency team to review the IEP to determine if the student may have second language acquisition needs or if the disability may be a determining factor affecting the student's ability to demonstrate proficiency in English. The school must make sure that there is translation available for the student and participating parent. Again, please remind the parent that the official identification process will take place when school reopens. A student re-enrolling can also be a student who has previously been identified as a student with a disability. The school must read the IEP, as well as the student's classification and the goals and objectives. Focus on their strength. Use the information to determine which services need to be provided. In absence of a recent IEP, use the latest IEP that they bring. The school needs to look for the functional behavior analysis or the behavior intervention plan. This will help the new school plan for accommodations or for the need to hire a paraprofessional or any other information to support the student needs. Even though the actual NYSED is not available, the ENL trained pedagogue must make a concerted effort to assess the student to determine what is their best ENL placement. We strongly suggest you use some kind of assessment if you have one. However, if the school does not, these are some ideas. One of the tools is use the first portion of the oral assessment of the NYSED which appears on the slide. These questions can serve as a baseline to determine the student's basic English speaking and listening skills. Please feel free to add more questions if you like. The slide following this one provides you with the rubric used to score the responses. If the student scores transitioning or above, you should also assess his or her reading and math skills. You can also choose a short assessment from ESLBits.net or any other online assessment. Also, don't forget to obtain a writing and math sample. Given the English and content learning loss that ELLs experience during school closures, it's advised that schools adopt a monitoring tool to measure ELL proficiency levels. Schools must also plan to provide learning and social emotional support to English and in the home language as needed to English language learners. Please note that the rubric does not assess entering level students, since the level 2 questions expect the student to at least comprehend what is being asked, even if the response is a one-word answer. This is the speaking rubric for the expanding and commanding students. It's important to informally assess the English reading, writing, and math level of these students, as well as look at their school records to gather additional information about their exposure to English, since they will be receiving only integrated ENL services. ELL students scoring commanding in the NYSED that have exited ELL status and former students will still receive English as a new language support and testing accommodations. At this time, the recommendation from the New York State Education Department is that schools strive to provide former ELLs targeted support as much as possible through the 90 minutes of ENL per week. Due to the cancellation of the NYSED, the state has also mandated that an English language learner that scored expanding in the 2019 NYSED and scored 65 or more on the ELA regions in January 2020 exit ELL status. Reopening plans must address the learning loss experienced by the lack of direct English as a new language instruction to English language learners. The school may want to prioritize those former ELLs to receive the direct 90 minutes of English as a new language support per week using the flexibility rule this year. The school must schedule a time for the parent to watch the video entitled Parent Orientation Video, ELL Programs in New York State, located in the New York State Education website. You can locate the link on the slide also. The video is available in several languages. There should be a qualified pedagogue available to answer the parents' questions once they finish watching the video. The school can remind the parent that while some of the options mentioned in the video are not available now, they will be made available as soon as schools reopen. While educators can expect some level of academic knowledge and skills lost due to COVID-19 school closure in all students, ELL students lost content knowledge in addition to 6 months of English language acquisition. Many of these students had greater challenges with accessing remote learning due to lack of equipment, to English support at home, lack of basic needs at home, and many other challenges. For this reason, the New York State Education Department guidelines recognizes this, and the guidelines require schools to exercise flexibility in programming additional minutes beyond the minimum units of study of ENL to students this year. In addition, they are to provide extra support before or after school or on Saturdays to supplement English and content learning. Due to the dire situation that many of these students have encountered during COVID-19, they must also have access to social emotional support in their home language. These actions will ensure that all schools meet the academic, social, emotional needs of these very vulnerable students. The qualified pedagogue should review with the parent the unit of study chart for the particular student's grade, which describes the number of minutes the student will receive in English as a new language and or home language instruction. Please note, schools are to schedule the student according to the most recently measured English proficiency level demonstrated by the student in the 2019 NYSED lab. Now discuss with parents any concerns they may have regarding health, food, and housing. Explain that when school reopens, they will be invited to attend a parent orientation meeting, as well as other meetings, and translation should be available at all times. Discuss how parents have the right to contact school staff to ask questions and ask for help for their child. Provide the parent with contact information for the administrator, the ENL teacher, the counselor, and the parent coordinator. Mail home a copy of their rights and page 2 of the home language identification survey in English and in their home language. Use the parent rights guide included in the reference page to briefly review it with them. Most importantly, parents need to know that there are services available to help them in school and in their community. Describe the services available for students and parents and ask about who else they may contact in case of an emergency. Describe how the school will make available a laptop and internet connection to the student and the parent and how to seek help in using it. Inquire as to what other needs they may have and connect them to supports. The official parent notification letter is not part of the process at this time. Do send home information with the student's English proficiency level, their program, school contact, and any other information that the school deems necessary. Remind the parent that this is only a temporary placement and that they will be called back to complete official forms and that the child will be assessed again when school reopens. The parent can get additional information about the services their child can receive by going to the New York State ELL Parent Hotline website. Notify the counselor and the administrator of any issues that come up during the interview and follow up on the parents' concerns. The New York State Education Department expects schools to make a concerted effort to work towards having a sustainable collaboration with parents to help kids learn and be successful, providing them with information through tutorials and constant communication. They can guide parents on assisting them to help students use digital platforms, complete school tasks, and use academic resources. Schools can help parents become better school partners when they share information on how to navigate remote learning, use digital resources such as translators, dictionaries, thesaurus, and apps to support students learning at home. The shift to remote learning makes the collaboration of parent and school more essential than ever. I have included in this webinar a list of resources. If you have more questions, please feel free to contact me. My email address is included in the resource page. Thank you for your participation in this webinar. Please make sure that you keep all your notes for this process. You should secure them in the student's file. You may want to refer to them when schools reopen. Please continue to check our webpage for other webinars and resources. Thank you.